Hey guys, I have a few things I want to talk about before I start with the stories. If you're only here for the stories, feel free to check the timestamps in the description or the comments if I remembered to put those there. But what I want to talk about is the future of this channel. I have a lot of interests in a variety of dark subjects, and I want to create more than just horror story narrations. But I feel the need to add that I will always continue horror narrations. I'm just looking to branch out a little bit. About a week ago, I made a video with more of a historical spin, and it didn't do nearly as well as I thought it would. So, my question for all of you is this: what kind of content would you like to see? I plan on experimenting in general, but I'm also open to suggestions. I'd love to experiment with things like true crime, paranormal occurrences, and even horror game related content. Let me know what you guys think, and be sure to mention anything you'd like to see. Also, I've recently created a Patreon account. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, and the recent advertiser boycott here on YouTube finally got me into gear. I did my best to incorporate reward tiers that would interest you guys. I would greatly appreciate if you guys went over and threw me $1 a month to support the channel. Also, one last thing, feel free to leave any suggestions for reward tiers over on the Patreon page. Maybe there's something else you'd be interested in seeing. Thank you all for so much support, and without further ado, let's get right into the stories. I work at a gas station in rural Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy and it pays alright. A few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy is weird. He's about 25 or 26 and he hardly speaks, but he's got the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I have both noticed this, but it's never been a problem, so there's not much we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him, and he's always done his job fairly well. Up until a few weeks ago, anyway. That's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem at any business that sells consumer goods, and there's only one person working at a time at this gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at a time, then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them, and it would always be right after Jeremy's shift. My boss has checked the security camera tapes from every single night he worked, but he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try and catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime under the table, so obviously I took the offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it would be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for a vacation, so I really needed the money. I took the tapes home, popped them in an old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time he worked, Jeremy started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. He counted up his draw, switched off the girl who was working before him, and waited for a customer. The first person who came in was Mrs. Templeton, a regular. She picked up her cigarettes and a newspaper and paid with a 20. Nothing unusual there. The next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle, usually comes in every few days. He filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, and then left. Next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before, but we get plenty of strangers passing through, just like any gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a $100 bill, and went on his way. I sat back and sighed. The only thing more boring than doing this job is watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching though, so I left the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on camera. Things stayed boring and routine until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Mrs. Templeton came back in. She must have forgotten something, but she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before, and the same newspaper. She paid with another 20. That's odd, I thought, but then again, she's a little absent-minded. I thought Jeremy should have told her she already got her smokes, but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought maybe he had another car he wanted to fill up, and the same pack of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card again. No big deal, I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Mrs. Templeton is forgetful, and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. That's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get diesel. Don't get diesel. But he did. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to his first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. Either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks, and just moved into town, or something really bizarre was happening. I kept watching. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before, every single one. I was seriously freaked out, and then at 6:03 Mrs. Templeton walked back in. She bought her cigarettes and newspaper again and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was going to lose it. I only watched another half hour before I started fast forwarding through the rest. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky motherfucker Jeremy had messed with the tapes. He had run a loop of his first hour of business over and over. That wasn't the case. There are windows around the cash register area that the camera covers, and I watched the sunlight fade as time ran on. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did all his duties exactly how you would expect, but the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he locked up and walked out to his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching, just to make sure. I fast-forwarded one last time to about midnight. At exactly 12:03, out of nowhere, Jeremy's face pops up on camera. I don't mean he moved his head into view, I mean that 1 second the store was empty. The next second, his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote. By the time I grabbed it, he was gone, just as soon as he had left. One frame he was there, the next, he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The other indoor camera shows the back area by the cash register, and I would be able to see how he got up to put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead to 12:03, but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on this tape, but he wasn't there. I didn't see him enter the store at all after he left. It's like he wasn't really there. He doesn't know the security code, and no alarms were triggered that night after he locked up. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it, same as Jeremy's face. 1 second it was there, and the next, it wasn't. I turned the tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body is exhausted right now, but my mind is racing. That tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. I work in a few hours. My boss asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found, but really, what the hell am I going to say? Jeremy works the night shift tonight, directly after me, and the plan is for my boss to come in just before I leave and confront him with me, as I'm supposed to be the one who caught him stealing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I suppose I'll have to show my boss the tapes, but I don't want to watch them with him. I never want to see something like that again. I can't get the image of Jeremy just smiling directly into the camera out of my mind. It was the creepiest look I've ever seen on another human being's face. Anyway, I'm gonna try again to get some last minute sleep before I have to go in and deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. Update. Updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect, but you really can't prepare someone for something like that. He's scared shitless. I still am too. And Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We've got a little over an hour to get our shit together, but neither one of us knows what to say to him. Is he just some fucked up guy who likes to steal motor oil and scare the shit out of people? Or is he something else? I don't know if this is crazy, but does anyone think he could have anything to do with the time loop? My boss said he never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but the way he popped up in this one made me think he knew I would be watching. It's like he wanted me to see what he could do, like he was showing off or something. The way he smiled into that camera was like a kid showing you a sandcastle they just built or something. I don't know, I probably sound crazy. I sure feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I have a really bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Update. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. I just got home and saw my previous updates. Things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you're all well aware. When I picked up the phone to call though, the sun went out, and I shit you not, that's what I thought happened. Apparently, I blacked out for exactly 5 hours, because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's time loop, and then I snapped out of it at the exact point I blacked out, if that makes any sense. But that's when things got really weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story to the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss was still right there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on the 12. It was 9:33 exactly. The clock on the register wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register, waiting for my boss to get him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of the day. I got the fuck out of there, didn't lock up, didn't turn the lights out, and sorry guys, I didn't grab the security tapes to upload to the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The gas station is on a major highway, and cars were parked all along it. Except, they weren't parked. They were frozen. The people inside were sitting still as wax statues. I got in my car and prayed that it would start. Thankfully it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned into music, like it's supposed to be, and from what I could tell by listening to the host talk in between songs, no one noticed the time freeze, or whatever it was. I was the only one. Well, I'm sure Jeremy noticed as well. I still have no clue where he is or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I ever got through to them before, or if I did, whether they took me seriously. I'm scared for my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow, if I can. Final update. I finally fell asleep last night around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since about 6. He woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called the cops. They came by to see what was wrong and he told them everything. The police around here are all small-time guys. They were more concerned with the missing motor oil than anything, but my boss figured he would take it as long as he had their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all our employees' applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not gonna believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on his application was an empty lot, or at least now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that he had an estranged son, who they never really talked about, but I can't say for sure if that's true. What I can say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled an arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it. Rumor has it that when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyway, my boss called and told me this, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. "What are you, crazy?" I said, but he assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped the bomb. The FBI were also in town and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15 and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to sleep much anyway, so I went down. 4 men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. We went over everything 2 or 3 times until they got all the details down. I told them about Jeremy, the security tape, last night at work, everything. Finally, after I finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we've got another one on our hands." Then they made me sign a bunch of papers saying I wouldn't be able to tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking law just by posting this. So, now I'm home. I'm not sure what to do with myself. That agent's words when I told him the story are going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Anyway, I've got to go. I have some errands to run today and then I have to go into work to pick up some tapes. My boss and I think this new guy Jeremy is stealing motor oil and I have to watch the security footage to see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime under the table and I'm trying to save up for a vacation, so I could really use the money. It should be pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes and catch him in the act, and that will be that. I'm writing this so that I can keep a bit of sanity. This is my suicide note. It's the end for me. I just want this down so the others may see why death brings suffering, why you can't let one person die in your life. My daughter got home from school at about 2 p.m. Her being in a kindergarten class, they sent the little tykes home before the others. I thought that I could get an hour or 2 into some TV movies. I finished at around 1:40, and exactly after I turned the television off, a ring came at the door. I walked to the door and saw a little girl with her mother selling Girl Scout cookies. I happily bought them and started to eat the tag-alongs. About 25 minutes later, my daughter got home. "Hello, Daddy," she said, throwing herself on me. I chuckled and got her some lunch. It was definitely a normal day, until that night. At around 1:40 a.m., my daughter screamed bloody murder. I quickly jumped out of bed and ran to her room. I threw the door open and saw my daughter huddled up in a little ball on the corner of her bed. I grabbed her quickly and turned the light on in her room. What I saw was completely chilling. I saw, written in red paint on the wall, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy and pride, sins of your forefathers, sins you can't hide. What the hell was that supposed to mean? The 7 sins? My daughter started to hyperventilate and she started saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," over and over again. I grabbed her asthma inhaler and tried to give it to her, but she was so far into an asthma attack that she really couldn't do much. I ran to my car with her and placed her in the back seat and drove as fast as I could to a nearby hospital. We were instantly admitted and she was saved from going into cardiac arrest. It turned out that my daughter, at 5, had a heart disease. It was about 7 years later, and during those 7 years, that things started to get really bad. It was Christmas time. I had a wife named Samantha and a son named Gregory. My daughter, Haley, was 12 years old. Greg was about 4. I was loving my life. The kids were happy. Samantha and I were happy. It was great, except for the previous years. The first year, all of the women around me became aroused and flirted with me constantly. You want to know why that was bad? Because everyone that I rejected killed themselves in some horrid way. One gutted herself with a kitchen knife, and another hung herself in the gutter on her house. The second year, my daughter became infatuated with food, so much that her heart condition worsened. She was rushed to the hospital over 10 times during the course of the year, but when the year was up, she became anorexic and stopped eating altogether. The third year, my house went into foreclosure and I became very stingy with money and food. We later found out that the landowner of our house still had rights to our land and was stealing money out of my credit card for 2 years. I'm lucky that I met Samantha and she let my daughter and I move into her home. We married in December and had my son in October. The fourth year, I was called by many talent agencies asking about my amazing singing skills, which I had shown off when I sat in with a band a month before the year started. The thing is, when I said no, they would keep calling me and calling until they became violent, calling me foul names. One of them even tried to kill me right outside my house. He shot at me with a handgun and clipped my ear. The fifth year, I became inexplicably angry at my daughter and wife for everything. I became abusive in the month of December, but in that same month, I fell down the stairs and suffered brain damage, but so little damage that it gave me little memory of the past year. I can only recall this because my daughter told me about it. The sixth year, my daughter became jealous of my son, getting all the attention. I tried to tell her that babies need more attention than 10-year-olds. She became angry and violent. She eventually ran away. I called the Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They found her in the abandoned house next to us, hiding in one of the closets. She was starving and eventually kicked her anorexia. It was the 7th year now, and nothing bad really happened at all. That is, until that night, at exactly 1:40 a.m., that the shit hit the fan. I heard my daughter scream, a blood-curdling scream. I quickly ran to her room and saw something that broke my heart and terrified me. A man stood looking at her bed, holding a sleek knife. He grabbed her and ripped her open with the blade. Oh God, it's hard to even think about, but he took all that remained of her. Jesus Christ, I was so proud of her, my baby. It's the 8th year now. My wife left me. My son barely knows me, and I curse myself every day. My late wife, who bore my daughter, I now know that it was you who gave me this curse. You always hated me. I couldn't save you. I never could, and you hate me for it. So now, I end it all. Hello, this is Gregory, the boy in the story. I'm 36 now, and I was given this note from the police about a year ago. This suicide note was written by my father back in 1980. I was only 5 years old. When my mother got the news about my father, she cried for about an hour. I was alone, too, and it wasn't until 10 years later that my mother gave me the real story. She cried crocodile tears when she heard the news. The only emotion she harbored for my dad was hate. See, my father did all those terrible things you see in the story. My father went insane at 1:40 a.m. in 1973, the date of his first wife and his anniversary. The psychologist he saw when his wife died had suspected that his wife's death was all his fault. He created an excuse and based his so-called revenge on the 7 deadly sins. The night of his wife's anniversary, he gave his daughter a shot of steroids, which gave her the heart condition. He killed every woman who flirted with him for 1 year, making their deaths look like suicides. The second year, he stuffed his daughter full of food, making her eat the largest portions. He became upset that it didn't kill her, so he made her throw up all her food after every meal when the year was up. The third year, he sold his house and let my mom use money from his credit card. He also became abusive for many years after. The fourth year, he claimed that he was the most talented singer ever, calling talent agencies and such. When they turned him down, he would call them foul names, and he even tried to kill one man. He shot the man right outside of his studio, clipping him in the ear. The fifth year, he tried to kill my mom and late sister many times, but my mother retaliated, pushing him down the stairs. He had acquired short-term memory loss and couldn't remember much about that month. The sixth year, he drove my sister out of the house, calling her a stupid bitch or a fucking whore. She hid in the house next door when my father called a lost child agency. The forensics team quickly turned her back into our house, which my mother frequently called hell. The seventh year, my dad was very tame. He became a very nice man, happy, and was proud of his behavior. until 1:40 a.m. On the night of his wife's anniversary, he killed my sister with a kitchen knife and fled with her remains to the Bahamas. I still can't believe it to this very day, and at the beginning of the 8th year, he killed himself. The police force says that it was a suicide. He created a makeshift noose out of organic material. They all lie, because I know the rope was my sister. There's a legend circulating around the television industry. It's about Channel Infinity. Channel Infinity is hard to get to, and reports vary as to what it actually is. I will tell you how to get there, and then what to do. Acquire a television, preferably with analog for the best experience, and the older, the better. Acquire a remote control. It doesn't have to go with the television you're using. Turn on the TV and set it to a channel that is static, or just a plain black screen if you're using a digital TV. Basically any channel you don't receive. Leave the room for about 3 hours. If you have a significant other in the house, have them with you. It's also best to call over a few friends. During those 3 hours, you should acquire a few items. I will list them in order from the most important to the least. Note, none of these are mandatory, but they help. You will want an item that you hold dear, 2 handheld mirrors, a firearm or other weapon, a favorite book, a mobile communications device, a key, and a sledgehammer or a pickaxe. After roughly 3 hours have passed, re-enter the room, have everyone else wait outside the door, close the door, stare at the static or blank screen or whatever you set the TV to until you feel disoriented or freaked out. Call the others into the room. Give the item that you hold dear to the person that you care about the most in the room, then send them back out. If you did not grab an item that you hold dear, hug that person and whisper a secret in their ear. Send them back out and command them not to come back in, no matter what, until you open the door again. Note, this will be harder for them if there are more of them, but it will be safer for you if there are more people, trust me. Hold the mirrors so that one is reflecting the television screen into the other, and the second is reflecting you, so it looks as if the television is behind you. Stay like this until a question appears on the screen. If you didn't grab the mirrors, then sit in a chair facing away from the TV until you hear a noise. Grab the remote. There will be a question on the screen. Press channel up to answer yes, channel down to answer no. There will be anywhere from 3 to 26 questions if reports are to be trusted. The questions will be anywhere from trivial to deep philosophical personal questions. Answer truthfully or you will not succeed in reaching Channel Infinity. After the questions, one of 3 things will happen. Your favorite show of all time will come on, but in the episode, all the characters will be heart-wrenchingly killed. You will see a picture of your least favorite person or thing ever. This is where you use the firearm or other weapon. Break the TV screen with the weapon. It'll then fix itself. Note, this is obviously the easiest of the 3 things. A strange shimmery vortex will surround you, and you'll be pulled into an alternate dimension. If you find yourself here, here's what you do. You'll find yourself in a twisted replica of your house. You will need to go to your room, where you'll find the 4 items listed that you will need for this part. Take them, exit your house. Outside will be a more evil-looking version of our world, with a red sky, a gray sun, dark orange plants, and an ever-present thin vermilion mist. You must go to the nearest public building, school, mall, gas station, etc. Use the key on the door, and enter. The key will fit the lock. If you do not get a key, climb in through a window. Upon entering, find a room with only one entrance, sit down, and begin reading the book. If you did not get a book, just sit down and be bored or scared. You'll hear footsteps outside of the door for some time within the next hour. Don't look up from the book. After you can no longer hear the footsteps, count to 250 out loud. Every 10 numbers, you will hear another footstep closer and closer to the door. Upon reaching 250, you will hear a knock on the door. If there are 3 knocks, open the door. If there are 4, say, "I forbid you," twice, and then open the door. You will see a stone statue of someone you love deeply outside of the door. It could be a family member, a best friend, a romantic partner, or even a fictional character. Smash its head to bits with the sledgehammer or pickaxe. If it's a female, also destroy the left hand. If you didn't get the hammer or pick, push the statue over. Exit the building from the entrance you came in through. It will be night. Look at the moon. It will be either pink or green, and either full or half. If it's pink and half, pull out the phone and call your third most recent contact. If it's pink and full, pull out the phone and dial a random number. Before they pick up, bite through your tongue. If you didn't get the device, pretend to do the things above. If it's green and half, strip off all your clothing and sprint back to your house. Don't look behind you, no matter what. If it's green and full, to put it bluntly, you're screwed. You'll be dead within half an hour. If it's one of the first 3, you will wake up in front of the television, and you continue the ritual. After this, you will have reached channel infinity. What you do now is up to you. If you got to the guide function, you'll see shows listed such as The Meaning of Life or How to Acquire True Love. Choose one. Note, the more people you have outside the door with you determines the revelations that are the shows. The more people, the better chance you have of seeing shows with more life-changing results. Or, if you keep watching the static, without going to guide or breaking eye contact with the television, you will see a series of images that will, if deciphered, reveal the answer to your greatest question. There are, at this point, many options, too many to write here. Just do what you feel like you must, and something will happen. The overwhelming majority of things will be good, but some will be bad. You may leave the room at any point. However, there are 2 catches. You may never speak of what you've learned after accessing Channel Infinity. And you may only reach Channel Infinity 4 times in your life. I hope you find the experience enlightening. I was too busy during the day to do laundry. That's what I told myself, but mainly, I wanted some time to myself out of the week to just be alone and unwind with my thoughts. The laundry room in the basement was always close to empty for the most part of fellow college goers in the early hours of the morning, so I always found myself there, squatting next to the spin cycle of my thoughts in the washer. Most of the time, I just pondered randomly and let my mind do its own white noise thing for a while. I must have been there on a Friday night or Saturday morning, and it was completely empty. It was early in the morning, 2 or 3 a.m., when my laundry finished the dryer cycle and I pulled my clothes out, ready to collapse in bed in my apartment on the 15th floor of the building. I made my way over to the only elevator that came down into the basement in the center section. While waiting for the doors to open, I read the notice board and the posters that advertised what to do for the next month. Looking at the clock behind me, I noticed it was really late. Exactly 3 a.m., I noticed, amused. I really shouldn't do this to my sleep schedule. I almost didn't hear the elevator's door open behind me, and if it weren't for the voice, I would have stepped in. That moment of hesitation probably, in retrospect, had saved me from an unknown fate. You know how elevators sometimes have a voice in their speakers to announce the floor and the direction it was headed? For example, if it were on the 3rd floor on its way down, it would say something like, "3rd floor, going down." This voice came out almost comically many octaves lower and much slower than usual.
"Basement, going down."
I felt a wave of uneasiness wash over me. There was never, for as long as I've lived in the building, floors lower than the basement. I'd never seen a button lower than B for basement on the elevator. I felt at that moment an extreme fear root my feet into place as I stood in front of the parted doors. The elevator doors usually shut after a few seconds, but this time they remained open for almost a complete minute, as if waiting for me to get in. When it had finally closed, I had the impression it had given up for the time being. While not wanting to take the strange elevator, I also really was against the idea of climbing 15 flights of stairs with my laundry in tow at this hour. I decided to wait for the elevator to come back. It might have been a faulty speaker, I rationalized. It was an old building. I suspected the maintenance hadn't caught on yet because nobody had noticed it at this hour. Surprised, I heard the sound of the elevator continuing down below the floor of the basement for an unknown number of floors before I heard the faint but unmistakable ding that signified the opening of the doors. There were floors beneath the basement? How deep did the building go? I remembered how deep the dinging sound came from underground and the muffled shuffle of what sounded like multiple people into the elevator, and suddenly felt like it wasn't the best idea to stay here waiting for the doors to open. I looked at the highlighted up button. It hadn't been my brightest idea to press it. I only wanted to go upstairs faster, but now I was scared of seeing the occupants of the elevator from its trip underground. I had basically guaranteed that the elevator would open in the basement on its way up. As soon as I came to that conclusion, I heard the elevator murmur on its way up and sprinted for the stairs that took me into the lobby. Halfway up the stairs, I heard the ding of the doors opening on the basement floor, but I didn't dare look back. I reached the main lobby and took a breath of relief. It was silent, but it was calm and well lit, and I suddenly felt a bit silly for overreacting. I looked down at the dark stairwell to the basement, aware that I'd never heard the elevator doors close. Had it always been pitch dark in the basement? I am always with you. I was there from the time you were born. I stood in the delivery room, staring down at you before you could even open your eyes to see me. Your family and doctors couldn't see me there in the corner, watching you with cloudy eyes, but I was there from the time you were born, and I followed you home. I was with you always, your constant companion. You played with your toys alone, while I stared from all angles in nearby mirrors, my matted, clotted hair with oily sweat that hung off my dented forehead like glue. I accompanied you all the time, drifting behind your mother's car on your ride to preschool. You thought you were alone in the bathroom, but I was on the other side of the door, wind whistling through the bruised hole in my throat. My arms twisted and hanging in their sockets as I stood hunched over the side of the shower curtain. I wait, and I follow you. I follow and drift behind you. I'm not seen. I'm almost non-existent in light. You never saw me that morning as I sat across from you at the breakfast table, a shiny red clot hanging from an empty tooth socket as I gaped grotesquely at you. I wonder sometimes if you know I'm there. I think you are aware, but you'll never understand just how close I am. I spend hours of your day doing nothing more than breathing, gagging, really, in your ear. I crave to be close to you, to always wrap my crippled arms around your neck. I lie near you every single night, cloudy eyes staring at your ceiling, underneath your bed, at your sleeping face in the dark. Yes, you caught me staring occasionally. Your parents came running down to your room one night when you screamed. You were just beginning to talk, so you were only able to cry out, "Man in my room." You'd thought you'd never forget the sight of me, with my collapsed jaw hanging to my chest, swinging back and forth. I sank back into your closet, and your mother wasn't able to see me, though you pointed and pointed and pointed. You thought you'd never forget when they left that same night. You saw the closet door crack so softly, and me crawling across the floor to your bed, on all fours, shambling and jerking movements as I pushed myself onto your bed on disjointed limbs. You learned a new word for me, boogeyman. Not quite the monster you thought I was. I'm just waiting and following you always, stroking your face with my knotted fingers as you sleep. You'll see me again soon, any day now. I'm coming, blunt and brutal. One day you'll walk across the road and I believe I'll plow into you with a loud roar. and a screech. You'll roll on the pavement, roll under wheels, blunt force, metal fenders, and my fingers touching your face again and again. You'll stare up from the cold pavement with cloudy eyes, your matted, clotted hair hangs in your face, and your jaw is unhinged and swaying against your chest. You'll notice me approaching. No one else will see me. You will stare past them into my eyes, and I'll leer down at you. For the first time in our life, something like a smile will come over my face. You'll swear you're looking into a mirror as clotted bits of scarlet bubble from our mouths. I'll lean down, past the doctors and the ogling people, and pick you up in my crooked arms. Our faces will touch, my wings will unfurl, and then you'll have to follow me. And I am always with you, for I am your guardian angel. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, a long-abandoned hospital was under reconstruction. The hospital, St. Anne's Mercy, was originally founded in 1802. The hospital housed the quarantined patients suffering from illnesses such as yellow fever, smallpox, and leprosy. It also housed the mentally ill and abandoned of all ages for many years. In 1924, the hospital was converted into a high-security insane asylum until 1957, before it was shut down after a tragic accident claimed the life of a nurse and 2 small children in an unexplained fire. The nurse was found standing in the room where the fire started, her features burned beyond all recognition. She pointed to the men who found her and let out a loud wail before she dropped to the ground, dead. Her injuries proving fatal. The bodies of the children were never found. As of 2006, the hospital was purchased and slated for reconstruction as a fully functional general hospital. Floor by floor, the hospital was cleaned and restored. After a few days of work, the construction workers began reporting strange sounds, smells, shadows, and a sensation of being choked by smoke. As the work continued, bizarre accidents began to plague the construction crew. Light bulbs would shatter without reason, small electrical fires would start in wires and outlets in the walls despite the brand new equipment. The elevator doors wouldn't open and would frequently get stuck between floors, and one unfortunate worker apparently fell to his death while trying to repair the faulty elevator. His body was found splayed and bloody at the bottom of an elevator shaft, a look of horror frozen on his face. While still under construction, the hospital was open to the public as an emergency room. The hospital staff was free to roam about all floors and wings of the hospital, with the exception of the children's wing, which was far behind schedule. Many workers refused to continue restoring the children's wing. They'd call in sick or quit, each worker claiming that they felt as though their lives were in danger. Soon, patients began to complain about odd sounds emanating from the vacated children's wing. Complaints of children playing loudly were common. Then, reports of screams and cries for help began to disturb the peace. The doctors and nurses insisted on hiring additional security to monitor the wing and refused to allow the staff to use the empty wing for storage unless they had someone watching them. Several security cameras were installed in the wing, one in each hallway, one for both elevators, and one on the emergency staircase. The security guard hired to watch the monitors began complaining of headaches, nausea, nightmares, and paranoia. After only 6 days, the security guard was found hanging in his office after he had attempted to scratch out his own eyes. The screens on the monitor had been broken with some black paint smeared over the display, and the recording videotapes had the film pulled free of the case and wadded up all over the office. There was a piece of paper found in the security guard's hands which read simply, "She's still looking." The hospital staff reviewed what little security footage was salvaged and didn't see anything out of the ordinary during the first night, with the exception of the lights occasionally flickering. But on the second night, there were brief glimpses of 2 small children playing in the hallways. The children were horribly burned and had black dots where their eyes should have been. The staff could hear them laughing as they played, even after the tape had stopped playing. On the third night, the elevator doors began to randomly open and close without provocation. Some of the staff claimed to have seen a bloodied hand reach up and through the doors, as if it was attempting to claw its way to freedom. During the fourth night, a weeping shadowy figure began roaming the halls. The figure was dressed in scorched rags and had black tears running down her face. As she roamed aimlessly, she would occasionally stop and look directly into the cameras, before letting out a shriek of emotional pain. The fifth night of footage showed a gurney with a zipped body bag rolling down the hall. This footage was especially grainy and damaged, but there was no mistaking the image on the screen. On the sixth night, the night the guard hanged himself, the footage was oddly clear. The gurney and body bag rolled back down the hall without provocation, but the body inside the bag slowly sat upright, its head turning in the bag to look at the camera. The footage suddenly cut to static, and when it cleared, the body bag was now standing up next to the gurney. Static hit the screen once more, and the body was now closer to the camera. From inside the bag, the body let out a horrible wail of pain that grew louder and louder as it began twitching and walking directly toward the camera. The video stops playing. There is no additional footage. The hospital staff who witnessed the footage began complaining of the same symptoms as the security guards: headaches, nausea, nightmares, and paranoia. One by one, each witness began suicide attempts, sometimes successfully. As a precaution, the witnesses to the footage were committed to mental institutions for their own protection, and the children's wing of the hospital was walled off. The staff still claims to hear laughter and screams coming from beyond the wall. They didn't believe me when I told them there was an open wireless network in range, aptly named free Wi-Fi. It was rather slow, but that's not a problem. You see, we were camping out in the middle of nowhere, Tar Hollow forests for any fellow Ohioans out there. We parked the truck about a mile down the trail, and from there, it was a 15-minute drive to the only ramp onto the highway. We were far removed from civilization, to say the least. After we were all done with the checking in on Facebook and replying to Snapchats, my friends and I made a game of finding the source of the signal. Marco and Sean went in one direction, Mike and I went in the other. 3 minutes later, we were all back at the site. The signal dropped off about 150 paces in the direction I went, and roughly 250 in the opposite. We agreed with Sean's proposal to go in a third direction, so to approximate by triangulation the whereabouts of the source. Marco counted the steps, Mike kept an eye on the signal indicator, Sean and I looked out for anything that remotely resembled a router. About 100 feet in, Mike told Marco to stop counting. The signal was at full strength. I looked around for flashing LEDs or running cables or anything that lit up. Marco suggested it could be a pocket Wi-Fi hotspot that another camper had left behind, though that was unlikely since there was no 3G coverage out there. But we found nothing. We gave up the search and made way back towards the campsite. That's when the Wi-Fi signal disappeared. The sun was setting and it was starting to fog up. A little spooked, we agreed we would pack our stuff and hike back to the truck. When we got back, we realized that we'd been robbed. Our bags had been torn open, our food supplies were missing, and our tents were toppled. What immediately seemed odd to me was that the thieves hadn't taken our laptops or cameras. Upon closer inspection, all they took were the foods and beverages, and in my opinion, that was the scary part. Needless to say, we crammed whatever we could into our torn up bags and made a dash for the truck. It wasn't until we got onto the truck that Mike told us to check our phones. The Wi-Fi signal was at full strength again. A chill ran down my spine when I saw the name of the connection. Run, boys, run.